Episode 293 Quick Wins and Long Term Results. This is the Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Given all the hoo-ha going on in the world at present and the fact that we are on a seasonal change or just through it, depending upon your location, I thought a look at quick return veggies and herbs would be useful. I'll then follow that with a few longer term foods. Every major economic recession since about 1970 has been preceded by a jump in energy costs. Some bigger than others, but they highlighted structural problems within economies and then made them worse. Given the last 3 years of environmental disasters, floods, fires and droughts, the pandemic, the Russian invasion and a spike in energy prices all highlighting supply chain issues in the trading systems of the world, I think it prudent to follow my grandparents' or maybe your great-grandparents' example and shorten those supply lines for at least some of our food. The suggestions I'll be laying out in a few moments might require a change of diet, but if that's the case, these foods will be of benefit, I would suggest. So if we start with a 1 by 1 metre garden, this can be scaled quickly as the season passes. That's about 10 square feet in the old money. In the Northern Hemisphere, the shorter growing material should be planted on the southern side of the garden and vice versa in the Southern Hemisphere. See the garden as a square in your mind and then divide it into 5 20 centimetre wide strips running east to west. That gives us some space to work with. My suggestion would be to go for leafy vegetables, mostly green but with some colour variation. So if we start with the side closest to the sun, I would plant the following. 1 basil, 2 cress, not watercress, 3 lettuce, 4 silver beet, 5 peas or beans. The basil, the cress and the lettuce would be ready to start picking first. More from the cress, less from the others. The cress could be cut in 10 centimetre swathes across the garden over a 10-day period before returning to the first cut. The lettuce would be picked from the outside leaves and allowed to continue to grow, and I've had lettuce last 8 months with this harvesting method. The basil would be ready for light picking from about the 4th week, and the picking would become increasingly heavy as the plants grow. Silver beet takes a bit of time to get going, but once underway can be picked for at least 18 months. I usually have something else in mind for the space by the end of the 18 months, but I don't see why this couldn't be pushed further. The peas and beans would depend upon taste and time of year. They tend to be a little bit longer in the growing, but are a pick and pick again option. The more you pick, the more they flower and reproduce. Having set one of these gardens on their way, a second, third or fourth and so on, would not be difficult. For a longer term, longer than it takes to start harvesting cress, I'd find somewhere to plant spuds. If you're going into winter, this might not be a goer, but something to plan for. I've been led to believe through my reading that a 5 square metre area will produce enough spuds for one person for a year. By adding some dairy, say butter, milk or cheese, then all dietary requirements can be met from just spuds in this part of dairy. Now this might be a bit extreme, but who knows what's ahead of us. And additionally, we could think about animal products on a small scale. 2 ideas immediately come to mind, poultry and rabbits. Poultry would provide eggs and manure and meat, rabbits just manure and meat. Now if you're not up for the meat part, I'd go for the poultry. Bantam hens would probably be the go. If you're more focused on meat, then rabbits would be indicated. These are of course personal choices, and I wouldn't judge anyone based on those. Do what works for you. Now while all this is going on, all this growing is going on, I'd plant rosemary, sage and thyme cuttings and just start them in pots or on garden edges to provide variety and micronutrients and above all else flavour. The options are limited only by your imagination. Now really I'm going to have to call stumps on this episode here. I'm into day 2 of 7 days of isolation following a diagnosis by that cheeky little virus that's wreaked so much destruction over the last couple of years, and I'm sure my voice is betraying that fact. We're doing all right, there's no need to panic, and we will be back next week. But remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can tell people about it, or you have a buy me a coffee link in the show notes and at the website. All coffees are gratefully accepted. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.